What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we are finally going to be doing the long awaited hero guide for the newest addition to the game in Count Dooku. Now, you guys have been begging me for quite a while now to get this guide out as soon as possible, and so pretty much since the moment he was released I've been working as hard as I can to get this out there, as I know a hero guide for a new character is definitely something that a lot of people want to see. Now, since he is a new character, I'm going to try and go a lot more in depth than I have for my previous guide, seeing as there's always a lot more to talk about with a new character compared to already existing characters. So this one will most likely be a fairly long video, but I will do my best to squeeze it all in as fast as possible. I did also just want to mention that I am currently at level 35 with Dooku, so I don't want anyone to think I've just rushed this guide out for easy views or anything like that. I have had a fair amount of playtime with each and every star card, and I've had around 4 or 5 40 plus kill streaks so far, so I did just want to make that known so that you guys know what I'm saying isn't just completely made up in order to get some easy views. Now, if you haven't seen my latest hero guides, then I will leave a link on screen at the end of the video, as well as a card up in the top right of your screen, so make sure to go and check those ones out after the video. With that out of the way though, we are going to go ahead and get stuck right into it. So we're going to start off with Dooku's base stats, and like I mentioned in all of these hero guides, all of these stats have been double checked by both myself and one of my subscribers, and there will be a link in the description where you can find his Reddit post with all of these stats. Now, we both tested these in arcade, and while I'm 99% sure all of these stats do transfer over to multiplayer, just bear in mind that there is always a chance that some stats may change from arcade to multiplayer. So if you see any stats that don't seem right, then definitely feel free to let me know down in the comments. So first off, we're going to take a look at his base HP, and he does have a very nice health pool coming in at 750, which is pretty much the standard for most Saber users, so there's not too much of a change there compared to the other characters in the game. On top of that, he does have 250 health regen, which is up there as the equal second highest health regen of all the characters in the game so far, and he does also have a star card that can increase this as well, so overall you should have no worries at all when it comes to Dooku's health. Now, his weapon of choice is of course his iconic curved lightsaber, and I'm sure we all know that Dooku was known for his skills as a duelist, so he's easily one of the best in the game already when it comes to his saber combat. He has the equal highest damage output in the game, dealing 130 damage from the front and 160 damage from behind, leaving him with the exact same stats as his apprentice General Grievous. On top of that, he does also have one of the fastest swing speeds in the whole game, clocking in at 1.8 swings per second, and one of his abilities does actually increase this stat as well, but I'll touch on that a bit more in just a second. He does also have a fairly long lunge distance, meaning he can swing at enemies from a bit further away than normal, and he will lunge a decent distance to close ground on his enemies, which definitely comes in handy when you are playing Galactic Assault. As for his stamina pool, I've classed this as medium because even though he's very skilled when it comes to blocking saber attacks, he actually has a very small stamina pool when it comes to blocking blaster fire, so it does have both pros and cons when it comes to his stamina. Now again, just keep in mind these stats are tested in arcade, and so like I mentioned, there is a high possibility that some stats may change between arcade and multiplayer, although as far as I can tell, most of these stats should stay fairly consistent regardless of the game mode. Now moving on to his abilities, and he does have some very handy abilities at his side, all of which are especially useful for his saber combat, making him even better than he already was with a lightsaber. His L1 ability is called Lightning Stun, and this causes Dooku to release a quick chain of lightning that both damages and knocks his enemies to the ground, targeting up to 5 enemies at once if they are within the area of effect. The Lightning Stun deals 160 damage to a single regular trooper, however it does deal less damage for each extra enemy that it hits, meaning if you do manage to hit 5 targets at once, it won't deal nearly as much damage than it would with just a single target. Now, it is extremely hard to test the actual damage drop off, however all we know is that it will one hit kill up to 2 enemies, however a third enemy won't allow for one hit kills, and so I do have a theory as to what the actual damage drop off might be. This is all speculation on my part, but I think there's roughly a 10 damage drop off per extra enemy, or possibly an exponential drop off with each extra enemy or something like that. If it deals 160 damage on one enemy, then drops to 150 damage for 2 enemies, that still allows for a one hit kill, which we know is proven, but then another 10 damage drop off for the third enemy would leave it at 140 damage, meaning it won't be a one hit kill. Like I said, this is all just my own theory, as there's really no consistent way to actually test the stats, but at the end of the day we do definitely know that it will one shot kill any regular trooper other than the heavy if there are either 1 or 2 enemies hit at the same time. Moving on to his L1R1 ability, and this one is called Duelist. Now this causes Dooku to take up a much more offensive playstyle, dealing more damage per hit as well as increasing his regular swing speed, so this ability is absolutely perfect for dealing a heap of damage in a very short amount of time. When Duelist is active, it will deal 155 damage from the front and 205 damage from the back, meaning you can one-hit kill any class from behind and all classes from the front other than the heavy. It also increases his swing speed from 1.8 to 2 swings per second, and while this may not seem like a whole lot, the faster speed in combination with a higher damage does really make a very noticeable difference, especially when used against heroes and reinforcements. This ability is amazing in a few different ways. It's super useful when you come up against heroes, as you can take out most heroes within just a matter of seconds, and like I said, it does pretty much one hit kill every class as well, so it is definitely useful for some very quick multi-kills in GA as well. Its only real downside is that the animation is a little bit slow, so I'd recommend getting close to your enemies and finding some cover, activating the ability and then heading into the fight rather than activating it out in the open. Moving on to the R1 ability, which is called Expose Weakness, and this one causes one single enemy to take more damage overall as well as move a little bit slower. It has a lock-on feature similar to Grievous's Thrust Surge, and the way you know when a lock-on is available is that there'll be a bunch of dots around the outside of your crosshair, at which point if you do activate the ability it will cause that enemy to be affected. It gives roughly a 20% increase in damage, not only from Dooku but also from any teammates as well, and if Dooku is the one to kill the affected enemy, it will actually instantly recharge the ability, meaning you can pretty much use it non-stop if you do take out the affected enemy. Expose Weakness is awesome against enemy heroes both in Galactic Assault and HVV, and it is also super helpful to stop enemies running away as it will slow them down, allowing you to catch up with ease. Once again, its only real downside is that it has a somewhat slow animation, so just like I mentioned for the last ability, just make sure you're using it in the right areas and not in a room crowded with enemies. So that is going to be it for all of his base stats and abilities. Now we're going to move on to some of the more important stuff, starting with his best star cards for Galactic Assault. Obviously, it really does come down to personal preference, so these definitely aren't the only cards that you can use, but these are just the 4 or 5 cards that I think are the most important and most well-suited cards for Galactic Assault. So the first card I'm going to recommend is his Rising Power Star card, and this one is of course his Health on Kill card. This will award Dooku with 20 HP per regular kill and up to 110 HP per hero kill, which is actually an extra 10 HP than any other character receives. The next card I'd recommend using is his Sith Control card, which does allow Dooku to have even more health regen by up to 120 HP, which does actually add up to a total regen of 370 HP, which is the second highest possible regen in the game behind Obi-Wan's 400. If you're a confident player, then this one can definitely be skipped over, as he does already have 250 regen anyway, but if you are newer or less experienced, then I'd definitely recommend at least giving this card a try, as it definitely does help stay alive a lot longer. The third card I'm going to recommend is his Blind Spot card, and this just increases the area of effect of the Lightning Stun ability, which is super useful, as like I mentioned before, it does have a fairly small area of effect. This card makes a noticeable difference to the range, and you'll definitely find yourself finding a lot more kills with the Lightning Stun ability when you do have this card equipped. Now, these 3 cards are the 3 that I personally find to be the most useful for Galactic Assault. However, I will touch on a couple more cards as well, just in case some of these cards don't suit your playstyle, as he definitely does have some other very useful cards as well. The next card worth mentioning is his Finesse card, and this one essentially gives Dooku more stamina for both attacking and blocking, so if you find yourself running out of stamina, then this is definitely the card for you. As for the last one, the Masterful Duelist card is another very handy one, as this card will make the Duelist ability be able to one-hit kill all 4 regular classes, regardless if you're in front or behind. And so if you are looking for some more damage, then this card is definitely another very handy card to choose. Now again, these are just the cards that I personally think are the most useful. However, he does also have some other really handy cards as well, so I'd still recommend to test them all out for yourself and try and figure out which ones suit you the best, although the ones I have mentioned are just a good place to start if you're not too sure what to choose. So now moving on to some of the best maps to choose Dooku on when you're playing Galactic Assault, and the top 3 that I've picked are Naboo, Kashyyyk and Tatooine. Naboo and Kashyyyk are both perfectly suited to Dooku, and not only that, but he does also cost less on those maps too, so that does mean you'll usually be able to get him a little earlier on in the game as well. As for Tatooine, I'm not really too sure what it is, but he just seems to be absolutely dominant on this map. I think the close quarter style of the map combined with his dominance at close range just makes him unstoppable, so definitely give him a go on Tatooine as well if you do get a chance. Now obviously this doesn't mean that these are the only 3 maps that you should choose him on, and to be honest, Dooku can really do pretty well on almost every single map in the game, but if I had to pick 3 maps that I could only ever play Dooku on, then these would definitely be my own personal choices. As for some maps to avoid, and to be honest, I'd actually have to say that I don't think there are any many maps that Dooku struggles on, so overall there aren't really any maps that you shouldn't choose him on if you do get a chance. Now, as for some tips for Galactic Assault, and the one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that Dooku actually has the ability to do 3 dashes in a row rather than 2, which you can see on the HUD down on the right of the health bar. Now, this may not seem like much of an advantage, but it's seriously useful for multiple different reasons, especially when it comes to fighting enemy heroes. Make sure to make the most of that extra dash as often as possible. Even if you're just running and using the dashes to get around the map quicker, it's definitely a good idea to use them and make the most of that extra dash whenever you do get a chance. One really good use for his dash is to counter against rolling enemies. If you actually let them roll away without swinging your saber, but then just dash towards them instead, by the time they've stood up from their roll, they'll have gained no ground at all, and then you can just simply take them out with your saber after that. So try and do that whenever you do come across a few rolly boys, as we do like to call them. Now, in terms of where to get yourself on the map, Dooku does seem to do best with a fairly aggressive yet safe playstyle, meaning you want to probably get yourself into some very aggressive areas on the map, yet you don't want to go rushing into rooms like you would with Maul or Rey, for example. If you get yourself up towards where most of the enemies are, find some cover and activate the duelist ability. You can head into some more risky and aggressive areas and make the most of that extra damage by one-hitting all classes other than the heavy. And so if you are more inclined to play super aggressively, then you can still do so, but just make sure to make the most of the duelist ability if that is the way that you do want to play. You should also use his lightning stun as often as possible as well. That doesn't necessarily mean use it at the first chance possible, but if you see an enemy that can be taken out with the ability, then in my opinion there really is no reason not to use it. It's also a really good idea to use it in combination with the duelist ability too. If you sneak around behind 4 or 5 enemies, activate duelist and then use the lightning stun, even though the stun won't one hit kill them, you'll be able to take them all out nearly straight away without too much trouble at all. That's also not the only combination you can use either. You can really just combine any of his abilities as well as regular saber attacks and deal some crazy amounts of damage. So it's definitely worth jumping in arcade and testing out a few combos so that when you do play a game of GA, you'll know exactly what combinations to use at the right time. I like to use both the duelist and exposed weakness abilities at the same time, which does actually stack extra damage for both abilities. And then with the lightning stun and 2 swings of your saber, you can actually deal up to 425 damage to the enemy from the front, let alone probably closer to 500 damage from the back. So combinations like that are really helpful ways to take out heroes and reinforcements with little to no effort at all. In terms of some of his weaknesses though, you do definitely need to keep an eye on your stamina when you're blocking blaster bolts, as like I mentioned earlier, you can definitely lose stamina very quickly, so don't try and play him like Obi-Wan and just stand there blocking forever. You should only ever block for a few seconds and try and escape to cover to reset. So that is going to be it for the Galactic Assault tips. Now we're going to move on to some tips for the hero vs villain game mode. So starting off with the best star cards, and the first one I'm going to mention is the blind spot card that I mentioned earlier, as the extra range for the lightning stun is just as useful against heroes as it is against regular troopers, so definitely worth giving this a try in HVV and Hero Showdown. The next card I'd recommend is the Masterful Duelist card, which I did also mention earlier too, and again the extra damage of this ability is good for obvious reasons, so again another card that I'd definitely recommend trying in these modes. As for the third card, I'd definitely recommend his Dominant Star card. This pretty much does the exact same thing by adding extra damage to his Exposed Weakness ability, which again pretty much speaks for itself, as more damage generally equals more kills when it comes to the hero game modes. With both of those last 2 cards equipped, you'll be dealing a whole lot more damage to your enemies, and that in combination with his already high damage output and skills with a lightsaber, you should find yourself winning almost all of your saber battles, as well as making easy work of any blaster heroes as well. These are the 3 cards that I personally use in the hero modes, but again that doesn't mean that these are the only 3 cards to use, so definitely feel free to leave your own cards down below if you do tend to disagree with my choices. Now moving on to some tips for the hero game modes, and Dooku really does excel in these modes if you do play him properly, as the devs did intend to stick to canon and make him one of, if not the best duelist in the game. There's honestly not all that much I need to go over for these modes, as a lot of what I already mentioned for Galactic Assault does work in HOV as well, but there are still a few little tips that will hopefully give you guys the edge over your enemies. The first tip I have is really just exactly what I mentioned before about letting your enemies roll around you. Most people tend to spam attacks in this game, and that does make it really easy for blaster heroes to roll around and get some space so that they can eventually deal some damage. Like I mentioned, what you really should do is just stop swinging as they've rolled and then dash towards them to gain any ground that they may have made from the roll. At this point you will often find that they'll roll for a second time as well, and so again it is just best to hold the block and let them roll again, because once they do roll for that second time, they're all but finished seeing, as now they can't roll for a few more seconds. Once they've come back up from that second roll, then all you really need to do is just attack 3 or 4 times in a row, and usually they'll be completely unable to defend themselves. As for Saber users, you want to make the most of your duelist ability in combination with your high stamina against Saber attacks. When you are entering a fight, activate the duelist ability as well as the exposed weakness if that is available too, and then you really just need to try and get your enemy to make the first move. Once they have attacked, your block should stagger them, meaning you can swing your saber twice then block again, which will make it so that you can get in around 300 damage before they even have a chance to attack again, and then when they do finally attack you'll already be blocking anyway, which leaves them open for another attack and so on. You can pretty much repeat this if they do keep on doing it. Most enemies will be smart enough to realise that if they keep doing that then they will die, so most people will stop. However, if they're gonna keep doing it, then honestly just keep doing the same thing over and over and you will win the fight without even really taking damage of your own. Now, in terms of some characters to watch out for in these modes, and I definitely have to say that Han, Chewie and Lando are the main characters that you need to keep an eye on. If you just play it fairly safe around these characters, use your lightning stun to knock them and then your other two abilities to deal plenty of damage, you shouldn't have too much of an issue, although it is still worth playing it very safe. Using that roll technique that I just mentioned is also a must against these characters too, but also don't let them roll for too long, as once their abilities recharge they can turn the tides with their stun abilities or Han's detonite charge, so try and take your time while still taking them out as fast as possible without opening yourself up to attack. If you play it smart, stick close by your teammates and make sure to make the most of your abilities whenever possible. You can definitely do very well as Count Dooku in HVV and Hero Showdown. So that is going to be it for our Count Dooku Hero Guide, guys. I know you guys have been screaming for this one to come out as soon as possible, so I did try and get it out ASAP for you guys, and hopefully it will help you all out. If you did enjoy the video, then make sure to leave a like down below. Not only does it help support the channel, but it does also show me that you guys do want to see more of these updated hero guides. The next guide will most likely be a Darth Maul hero guide followed by a Yoda hero guide, so keep your eyes peeled for those over the coming days and weeks as well. If you are new to the channel, then definitely feel free to subscribe and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 guides or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day and I'll catch you all in the next one.